Well, here we are on Monday morning, and or yes, it's still morning. No, is it? No, it's afternoon. Afternoon.
Afternoon, Jude.
I got up late, you see. Uh,
Uh, uh,
and Pat McCart is waiting for me, as you can see, and he's in fine fettle today. As why would he not be?
Jude, the one was howling earlier on there. It's hard to believe it's May, but there you go.
But sure, rough winds to shake the darling buds of
Darling
May.
buds of May. Oh, hey. See, the whole bit of education is so easily carried. Dr. Shakespeare.
But sure, somebody said I went out for a walk. I put on my oilskins and went for a walk, and I only met two other people, and they were looking sort of shamefaced. So I said, "It's a terrific day, good day for a walk." They all laughed.
What does Billy Connolly always said? There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
And that's right. Well, I sincerely believe that. If you live in this climate, if you're going to let the weather decide what you're going to do,
you'll do nothing.
Certainly in your leisure time, then God help you is all I can say. Okay, enough about the meteorological situation, and let's look at things political. Now, Pat, this day is a holy day. Yeah. Not in the sense of religion, but in the sense of politics. For on this day was created a state, which we are presently, well, I'm enjoying it. You, unfortunately, have been nudged out of it in Donegal. Yes. But you're just sitting at the edge like a little dog looking up and envying other people the joys that they have. Would you agree with that, Pat? Are you sorry that you weren't included? Are you going to ask for entrance at this stage?
You won't begin to believe how happy I am not to be included. Jude, I was reading on the Irish Times this morning. Freya McClemens, who's a very good journalist and a former colleague, she did a very, very good piece today. Today's what I think. I don't know if it's the exact date, but it's the exact match of today, the Monday, 1921. I think it was May 2nd or 3rd.
Was it?
The Northern Ireland state came into being. Jude, I have no wish to degrade or sort of have a go at unions. By all means, celebrate. That's sure. But anyone seriously saying to anyone of the nationalist hue that we should be celebrating Northern Ireland, they've got to be kidding. It's been a disaster. It's been a disaster socially, politically, economically, and we're at each other's throats. There have been some terrible atrocities. The foundation of the state was totally, completely, and artificially created by a sectarian head count. We had a police force and a militia. Jude, I could keep going, and so could you, and so could we all, and we could all rehash the past. I'd be very interested to see where we're going, but what do you do? The past will always be with us.
Well, you see, I'm just wondering, I feel largely like you, but for example, you said it was carved out as sort of a sectarian statelet.
Yeah, well, that's why Donegal wasn't taken on. There was too many Fenians and Catholics in Donegal.
That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it would be that you're trying to arrange for a border that will include, so that the majority of people will be comfortable with that.
No, you've lost me. No, I don't understand. No, hold on. What do you mean by that? I don't understand.
Well, you see, if you could look at it two ways. You've just said that they carved out this statelet on a sectarian head count,
which is 100% accurate.
Number of Protestants, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying there is another way of looking at that, which from a unionist point of view would be to carve out a state where at least the majority of people would be comfortable with what they had with the state. And the same applied south of the border. The majority of the people were, more or less content with that. So, you could have that argument. I don't subscribe to it myself, but it is an argument we don't look at enough.
And I wouldn't accept that argument for a second. Not a second.
Not at all. Tell me how wrong I am.
Democracy and you're totally wrong. I'm not even joking. Because
the
whole thing was set up on a sectarian head count. Donegal, Cavan, and Monaghan were taken out of the equation because there were too many Catholics living there. Yeah. It was set up in a way to ensure they thought it might last forever. A Protestant ascendancy, a majority of Protestants, and the Catholics were not would never get above 30%. There was discrimination, sectarianism, and anything bigotry. You want to name it?
That's another matter.
I know, but hold on. It was in poverty and all. So the whole idea was to keep the state for one, a hegemonic state for the Ulster Protestants, and that was, there was no generosity and no anything else. So, and the setting up was set up in a way to ensure that happened.
I think I would distinguish two things. One is the way the state was set up, and you could argue, and I'm sure unionists would argue, that it was set up so we avoided civil war, and that's probably probably right there. So yeah, the majority of people in the north wanted it that way, and the majority of people in the south wanted it that way. Now, how the state was run is another matter. I agree with you that the state was run under sectarian lines, there was discrimination and so on. And then we had the battening of civil rights marchers and then all the troubles. I agree with all of that. I think that the using power treated those without power in a disgraceful way. And it's come back to haunt them because it never did nationalists or Catholics find themselves really at home in this state. There were benefits, but as Jude has said often, they had a chance with the 1998 agreement to make room for Catholics, nationalists, and make them feel comfortable. And many of them were ready to feel comfortable. And he says they acted in such a way that that's evaporated and that will not come back. But anyway, I'm just making that distinction. There is a difference between saying there's a badly run state and saying that the creation of the state made no sense or wasn't fair. Maybe too
but you said something that no, but hold on, you said something earlier on that was the way the majority in the north wanted, and that was the way the majority in the south wanted.
Yeah.
I totally disagree with that, Jude. I really genuinely.
Well, which one?
The second part particularly. Okay. A gun was sort of put to almost, well, metaphorically, almost literally, to Michael Collins to sign this or else. That was not a majority wishing for partition.
Well, I think they did in the sense, Pat, because the alternative was civil war, and Britain weighing in on that, and with terrible violence or whatever it was that allowed George.
But Jude, with respect, that is not but that is not a democratic decision. No, but hold on. Irrespective of the consequences, a gun was put to, well, I'm using that expression again, but it's almost literally true.
Oh, yes.
A great and terrible war or sign now.
Yeah, that's true. So people looked at that and said, what do we want? Want a terrible war? Or we want to settle for this unsatisfactory, but it's the best that's going at the moment.
Yeah.
So you could argue that.
But there was neither was a true democratic option.
Oh, no, I agree with that. Well, if you talk about democratic being the will of the people and no violence involved, yes. I mean, the 1980s.
We're one homogenous island. We're one landmass. And if tomorrow morning, let's get ridiculous. If tomorrow morning Cork and Kerry decided they were going to go for some sort of partition from the rest of Ireland, do you think that would be geographically, politically, socially, and any other word you want to think of acceptable?
Well, you see, what would be the alternative? If there was an alternative that only involved terrible violence, a lot of people would vote for Cork and Kerry being whatever, given their own way. Yeah.
But then the implications for the rest of Ireland, the rest of the island, that the part would be cut off from the sort of the hinterland, and the implications socially, economically, politically, would be total disturbance. I know. Whereas on the one landmass, we should all basically be have one government, one rule, because what affects one affects the other.
I agree completely, and I also would say that it was undemocratic in that in 1918 the Irish people voted, and they voted overwhelmingly to have home rule, to look after their own affairs, and the British government treated that with contempt. And you had the Black and Tan War.
By the way, Jude, let me go get a wee bit parochial on you here. I was born and raised in Donegal. All in a short time. I've lived most of my life, all of my life here actually. And Donegal, we may as well have been neither place, because we were as much affected by the northern state. Donegal's a sort of Cinderella place. It's neither of the north nor of the south. And immigration here has been phenomenal. There's very little industry. We're a place that was badly treated because of the partition of this country.
I agree completely. In fact, though, I'd extend it a bit. I can see what you mean, Donegal in particular. But in my opinion, every county in the south of Ireland should have considered themselves affected by partition. The tragedy is that they didn't. Many of them are taught to think of the 26 counties as their country, where there wasn't violence and where everything was sort of okay and there was brown envelopes and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Let's move up to present day in this, Pat. And you mentioned Freya McClement's article in the Irish Times, and it's true, it was a good article. And here's a quotation from it. She's talking to this woman who's Valerie Quinn, who's the chair of the Ulster Bands Forum. And Valerie says, my fear is that the status quo will not remain that way, and that the agitation towards a united Ireland and the push for it won't stop. In terms of Northern Ireland, I'm very positive, but in terms of there not being a Northern Ireland, that scares me. You can translate that very briefly. What that woman is saying is, I fear democracy and I fear the workings of an internationally agreed treaty.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to say, be concerned for people's fears, arrange things so that they feel secure and so on. And I heard Michael D. Higgins on Talkback today. And it seemed to me that essentially he was saying we've got to learn to get reconciled, be together, and then, understand each other's ways. We have an international treaty, and it says that you can have a border poll if a majority of people want it. And I think by now, well, when do you know when the results of the census comes out? The North's the British.
No, I don't know. It should not be.
Sometime next year. No, maybe next.
I think the last one, the Republic, was it 2011? I think it was. I'm not 100% sure.
That would be the same. That'd be a year. We had ours this year. So
it's every 10 years. So I presume they've postponed it this year.
So in about a year's time, there should be some information on this. Of course, it doesn't mean that because you have a certain number of people Catholic that they all want to have a united Ireland. But I just get impatient with people, like Valerie Quinn, who said, "Oh, I want these things to stay the way they are." Oh, come off it. I want things not to stay the way they are. That's just as legitimate.
Jude, there's a large majority of that percentage of the population which is nationalists, do not want things to remain the same. This has been a cold house for many of them. Like, Jude, the problem I think a lot of unionists have, there's British indifference for starters. The mainland does not give a monkeys about Northern Ireland. They've got, I think the Irish Times, Freya, or quoted somebody, they've got a perfidious prime minister that they don't trust. And then of course the demographics and the people advocating for Northern Ireland, that is all combined to make unionism very nervous and so on. And I have no wish, Jude. I really genuinely don't have and I'm not going to put a gun to anybody's head, and I'm not going to get involved in physical force and put anybody into Northern Ireland. But here's the thing: in 1998, there was a thing called the Good Friday Agreement, was signed up to, and it provided a peaceful means that the people of the South give up Articles 2 and 3 to claim over the natural territory of this island, so that everybody could say, right, you have your share, we have our share, and see when the democratic wishes of the people come together, that democracy triumphs. Now, you can't, if you want to go back on that, right, that's a different ball game. But that was the deal we were signed up to. And if a majority and the people of the North want to vote for United Ireland, that is democracy.
Well, now, I think tying in with this is something that's exciting most of the journalists today, and that is the fact that the DUP suddenly and dramatically have changed their leader. Arlene was gone and said 48 hours. And I didn't see anybody who wrote about it seeing it coming. It just happened. Boom, she's gone. Putz immediately, Edmund Putz immediately said, I'm running. I want to be. We all thought he wanted to be the leader of the party and therefore First Minister. He now says that he wants to be leader of the party, but not First Minister. Now, the name Paul Givan has been mentioned, and there's very strong indications that if Edmund Putz won, he would be the leader of the party and Paul Givan would be First Minister. That seems to be bizarre because Edmund Putz would be an MLA.
Do you get the point of this? Do you get what would be the strategy and the thinking? I don't get that. I genuinely don't. Well, surely if you're the leader of the party, you should be calling the shots.
Well, you could be, but I mean, you might say that of Gerry Adams, for example. Jerry Adams was an MLA, wasn't he? And then he
But
had other people
if
as
you're going into
ministers. He wasn't
negotiations,
a minister.
well, why not Edmund Putz if he's the leader of the party? Why not being first minister? What's the thinking?
I think it is to unite wings of, and maybe the general public's perception of the DUP. On the one hand, Edwin Putz, who's in his 50s and who's fairly sort of traditional, conservative, ultra-conservative, in fact, creationist, etc. On the other hand, you have Paul Gibbon, who looks at least sort of youthful, who is also, I'm sure, a God-fearing man, but he's got that sort of sparkle of youth about him. So my bet is that that's what they're doing. However, they now have to deal with the second. There was some talk that the man Putz would just be crowned and that'd be it, the same as the other leaders. Now, Jeffrey Donaldson has today declared his wish to run, and he has declared it in the constituency office of Gavin Robinson. Now, and don't forget, Jeffrey Donaldson is based in Westminster. He's an MP. So my bet would be that he will do exactly the same thing. He will say, I'm going for leader of the party. I'll be an MP.
Gavin Robinson will be first minister.
And Gavin Robinson be first minister. Yes, exactly. Will that save them? Will that solve the problem of this increasing agitation that Valerie Quinn talks about? I don't think so. Do you?
No. Jude, someone. Maybe this is a pivotal moment. Today marks the centenary of the founding of the Northern Ireland State, and this election of this leader of the DUP, the leader of unionism, might determine what course the next 100 years takes. Could well do. And the thing about it is, you have the choice between Edwin Putz, whom I think a lot of people in the DUP will certainly be voting for, because he seems to have Arlene seems to have gone off course with the backwoods people, the sort of the fundamentalist wing of the party, which seems to be the majority. And Sir Geoffrey is a very smooth, the Daniel O'Donnell of Irish politics or Northern Irish politics. He's a very good performer on TV. He's very smooth. He's well liked down south. Every time he comes on, he gets the softest of soft interviews. And he'll play well in Dublin, and they'll be bent over backwards there to him. And he's also very articulate when he's on Westminster. Now, can you imagine getting Putz up in front of somebody like Emily Maitlis on Newsnight? And so you don't believe, so you think homosexuality is a crime, you think abortion should be, and you think that the Earth's only 4,000 years old. Good for you. You can imagine the destruction that would do for them.
Pat, 6,000 years old.
All right, 6,000, whatever. So, whereas Geoffrey is all things to all people, and so on.
Okay, so you're a nationalist. You're maybe a Republican even more suspect. Which of the two would you like to see become leader or to win this leadership contest?
In a way, Putz.
Me too. Me too, because I think he'd be a more disastrous leader. He would bring things very much more quickly to a head. Actually, I think that if Jeffrey Donaldson is made leader, things will come to a head as well. It's just that they come to a head slower, because he is usually is a much more user-friendly type.
Joe Brawley had a brilliant interview on News Talk the other day. When he told about going in, he was going up to Stormont, and he went in, whatever it was, the members' place for him. And he said all the DUP people were sitting around a table with their backs towards everybody else. He said the SDLP and the Alliance guys were all sitting chatting to each other, but they, and all. And he said when he was doing this whole thing about giving, his kidney, and it was a cross party, cross religion, cross border thing, and he went up to some, I think Stormont to launch it as well. Jim Wells, or whoever it was, with the Minister for Health at the time, and he says, here we have the Londonderry footballer, the man who brought that Maguire Cup into the UK for the first time, and all that sort of stuff. And as Joe said, the surgeon, who was Dr. Brown or someone, says, looked at him and rolled his eyes. As Joe said, the DUP couldn't even leave it alone then. This was about giving kidneys to people, nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with politics, nothing to do. That Putz belongs to that sort of wing of the party. So let's bring it all out and open. The smooth person can sort of do it very differently.
It seems, I agree, it seems to be impossible, regardless of who gets to be leader. It seems to be impossible for them to find their way out of the situation they're presently in. The demographics are against them. Their vote seems to be leaking away to Alliance or to the TV to a lesser extent. They obviously are in some degree of turmoil in that they've decapitated their leader just inside 48 hours. No messing, no ifs or buts, no agreement or no coming out and saying I've had my time and you passing the baton.
Jude, can I stop you there 1 minute? Because I'm going to ask your opinion. She said, Arlene said, not one member of the party has been in touch with her, and she is not just leaving. We sort of touched on it the last time, but it's actually confirmed now. Apparently, not only is she resigning as leader and leaving politics, she's leaving the DUP in its entirety. In other words, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me she's absolutely disgusted with the people, the MLAs in Stormont particularly. I think she knew that the MPs, at least half the MPs in Westminster would be opposed to her. But I think she was, she must have had friends who were MLA people and who supported her up to this. And they clearly pulled out and went against her. And she's really, feels like, I would understand the feeling. She must feel terribly let down on a personal and political level. And she says, right, that's it. I'll find something else to do. I don't want anything more to do with those people.
But hey, Jude, here one other question for you. This is the woman who left the UUP because it wasn't hard line enough for her, and she joined the DUP, and she was against the Good Friday Agreement.
Don't forget Jeffrey did the same thing, Pat.
Yeah, but it almost as if now she's got too much of what she wanted, that the DUP has gone way further than she intended. So, is she the same person as she was when she started?
Well, I suppose she's not. Things would change over a period of time. And I think she has become more and more hardline in her views. But I know of someone who knew her and her family and so on over the years down in Fermanagh. And they would have said there's a hardline streak there that you have never seen before. That will make Peter Robinson look like a namby-pamby. So whether they're right or not, I don't know. Final point, Pat, just before we leave this and move on to another one. Freya McClemens, I think you're rightly, and I know she was a colleague of yours and you praised her for the article, and it's a pretty good article. But there's one thing she says, and there's a tendency people, I think particularly in the South, but even up here, have of saying. And she has this, she says, the questions involved are complex. Now she's talking about the border. And she says the questions involved are complex. I'm going to say she's wrong. And people shouldn't say that. The question of the border is not complex. The question of the border could not be clearer from the Good Friday Agreement. When the majority of people wish constitutional change to get it, full stop. So this complexity thing, she goes on to say that these questions have rightly given rise to debate around the constitutional arrangements on this island, what they might look like, so on. Well, what you're saying is, deciding what sort of state you're going to have if you have an all-Ireland state. It's complex. Of course, running a state's a complex thing. But there's a real tendency among commentators, I think, to say, oh, goodness, it's so complex. You really couldn't ask people to follow democracy in this matter. It's so complex. We've got to reconcile with our unionist neighbours, etc., before we can even think of voting. Well, I'm sorry. I believe in democracy. And I think if you come to an agreement and if you say a majority are in the position to call the shots, that's the way it should be. What's the point? What is the point in agreements otherwise?
Well, what you're saying is really that the core argument is simple. That it's, and I sort of can't argue that, because it's either, either we go the democratic route or we don't. There's nothing complex about that. If a majority decides tomorrow morning that they want a unitary state on the island of Ireland, that's democracy, and that was which was signed up to after years of complex negotiations and voted on by the people of this island as a whole.
Yeah, I said that be the last thing, but I'll just say another thing, that part of her quotation here, and she's talking about the problems really of creating of the state, what it would look like, and she says what it might look like in the future around the nature of both states, their identity, and that of the people within them. Presumably, she's talking about, North and South, which then would be one. But the nature of both states, their identity, and that of the people within them, and around the relationship between these islands and further afield. When I read that sort of stuff, essentially what it seems to be talking about is what place would unionism have within the new state. If I were a unionist, I would tend to be a little bit dismissive of that. I would tend to say, look, my unionism means I want to be in a political union with GB. If I'm in an all-Ireland state, I'm not in political union with GB. So don't kind of cod me with all this talk about protecting your identity and so on. What do you think about that, Pat? Is that too hard?
You know, like the term unionist, you know, doesn't mean you're in favour of United Ireland. You know, so you know, Jude, I'm not sure where you go that whole thing, but Jude, where do you go? It's simple. I don't even know where the hell you sort of break all this down. Look, unionists, apparently, if they voted, someone was saying there'd be roughly somewhere in the region, what is it, 15% of the population? It's got to be about 20% actually, wouldn't it?
Yes.
There's about 5.5 million, and you add on 1.5 million. There'll be about 6.5 million people on the island of Ireland, and you know, and if that would be roughly about 15-17% of about 1 million of them are unionists. That would give them a hell of a lot more influence in Dublin than they ever got in London. Now, the whole thing about do we have a parliament in Belfast and a parliament in Dublin? Do we have a confederacy or a federation, or I don't know what sort of things would now? The state would probably change because it would mean bringing in 1.5 million people. Roughly, what is there's 900,000 Protestants and about 600,000-700,000 minimum union or nationalists. So, and you've put them all together and whatever. So, Jude, there would be a lot of change, and I presume that's where any complication is going to come in. But Jude, let's be honest. In the event of United Ireland, those are all things that are going to have to be put into place anyway. By the way, Jude, I was reading the last day. You know this thing too about the subvention. You know that's another load of rubbish. They're talking about 13 billion and all the rest. You know, Jude, apparently if that's broken down, it could be as low as 2 or 3 billion. But anyway, that's a matter for another day.
That's right. And do you think it would be to the EU's advantage and many of the Irish Americans' advantage, and even
to Britain's advantage?
Yeah, to have a united Ireland. And I mean, if they really feel it is something desirable, they should be prepared, and I'm sure they would be prepared to support it financially, at least for a transition period, 10-year transition period. So anyway, that's it's a very interesting topic. I just finished it with this. Have you seen that little video by that Cork guy, where he plays 2 parts?
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
His name is Tag something. What's his second name?
You've lost me.
Tag Kenny or something like that.
He plays.
I'd urge everybody to go onto YouTube and put in, you know, Cork. What other keywords would you put in there? Video. Ireland,
Britain,
the North, etc. It'll come up eventually, and put in the name Tag, TADHG, because it summarizes. I remember somebody saying, it was Susan McKay said that she would be struggling to write a column for a couple of days, and then she'd submit it, and then she'd get the paper, and she'd suddenly look, and she'd see, oh God, there's a cartoon that says the whole thing just in one glance. She's been trying to labor. The same thing applies to that under 2 minutes video. It is absolutely brilliant, and it says nearly everything about the situation between the North and the South.
Yes.
There you are. I don't even charge them for it.
I know, but here I'll tell you. You just reminded me of someone. There was a history professor in Canada, and he was trying to tell us the total story of, you know, the building of the railroad across. And he said one day he listened to Gordon Lightfoot's song, the Canadian Railroad Trilogy, and he says in 6 minutes, Gordon Lightfoot explains something that took him years to teach students.
It's true. Art does that. There's no doubt about it. Okay, there's another election coming up very, very, very soon, and I'm kind of puzzled because there's been very little attention given to it in the media here. In fact, virtually none. And that is the Scottish general election. It's important to us, I think. Well, maybe you want to say a few words about that, Pat?
Because... Well, no, Jude, here, I think, Jude, if the SNP get a a ringing endorsement and get a massive vote, they could be out of what would you say, the remit or the auspices of the UK quicker than Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And the implications of the SNP and Alba, who are apparently around about 3%.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much difference they're going to make. Now, the Labour Party and the Tories in Scotland are nearly neck and neck. I think they're around about 20%.
Yeah.
The lowest the SNP have got, I think, is 37%. And if Alba gets 3%, up to 40. And by the way, it could be what is it? Sir John Church's. I think it was you passed that on.
Yeah.
He's saying basically basically the positions haven't changed. So the SNP, if all goes well, are on a way to a massive majority.
Well,
I don't think it's a massive
majority, Pat. I don't think it's massive.
Sorry, I'll take that back. But a big majority,
a majority, not an overall majority. But that's what they would like to have.
But if they get up to about half, Jude, like in other words, half the people of Scotland, are going to be told no, you can't, because a couple of wee minor parties are sort of saying, like, Jude, if what do you call it, the SNP get up to around about 50% of the vote, and the Tories are on 20%, the Tories are able to turn around and say, no, you're not getting an independence vote.
I think the key thing here is the one party you didn't mention, Pat, and that's the Greens. The Greens in Scotland have committed themselves totally to a vote for independence. They're at one completely with the SNP in that. Now, there's a lot of other areas that they're against the SNP, but they're agreed completely in that, and they've laid their cards on the table. They've made it perfectly clear that if you give a vote for the Greens on this question of a referendum on independence comes up, they are totally for it. Now, combine the vote for the SNP and the vote for the Greens, it's definitely going to be a majority. And if Nicola Sturgeon's true to her word, there will be, within something like 2 years, 2.5 years, there will be an independence referendum. Now, Boris Johnson will do all that he can, I think, to stymie that, and he might even do what they did with the people, the Catalan vote for independence. Who knows? Hard to say, but I don't think that would quite work, because I think the more he resists
I don't think I don't think that would quite work in Britain. I don't know how the Spanish got away with it in Catalan area, but Northern Ireland has taught people. See, when you try and deny people democracy, violence, and I have an idea it wouldn't work too well in Scotland.
No, I don't think so. So you see that, as you implied earlier on, that's terribly important to us, because if they have a majority, and it looks like they will have between them and the Greens at least, even they don't get it for the SNP, there will be.
By the way, I must have read something wrong somewhere along. At one stage, was not the SNP up to around about 45%? So if they got 45% and Alba got 3%, about 48, and the Greens got something like 10. That would take them well over 50, no matter what way you come at it.
Yeah. I think it definitely, they're going to have a majority of parties in favour. I think the SNP would like to have it, but they would be doing it as much like Sinn Féin, they're not going to turn away support for a united Ireland, but they'd rather like to have it all in their own hands. So it's looking pretty likely it will actually happen. I can't see how Nicola Sturgeon can, if she gets, as she almost certainly will, the numbers she can get or will get, if she gets those, she can't possibly turn around and say, I've changed my mind, it was not time yet, we'll put it off for another while. And she has said she's going to have the vote, an independence vote, as far as I remember, in the lifetime of this government. So that'll give her 4 years, within 4 years or so.
Yeah. Jude, there was a great, saw it on Facebook. The fact that England can decide whether Scotland can have a vote for independence is the greatest thing for independence you could ever have. In other words, England gets to decide whether Scottish people can vote for their own independence.
This relationship between, as they say, the four nations has always puzzled me.
What do you mean?
Well, I know well, I'm not say who it is, but I know a woman whose grandmother and whose people come originally from Scotland.
Yeah.
And she was saying at the time of the 2014 referendum, she was saying she hoped that they maintained the union with Britain.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why would you not want, the place that your grandmother and so on came from, would you not want that to be independent, in charge of its own affairs. She says, no, well, I think the fact there's a political union, I feel a kinship with Scotland. And I think if you break the union between this political union, to some extent that weakens that nice, comfortable relationship I have with them. And I was trying to explain to her, the reason you have a union in the first place, and you'd never hear this talked about, is because England was far more powerful than Scotland.
Absolutely.
The reason you have the North at present, and all of Ireland up until 1921 or whatever, is because England was more powerful. Same for Wales, because England was more powerful. That's garbage about, I tell you what sums that up. You're talking about art a minute ago. Is that song by the Proclaimers, Cap in Hand?
And
Isn't that a wonderful? Doesn't it sum it up where he says, I don't understand how we're asking for something that we have, it's part of what we own. Anyway, I forgot how we started in that rant.
But you'd look at it like I say, right? We keep coming back to this whole concept of democracy. Democracy is not when 50 or 55. How many people live in England? 50 million people plus.
I hear 60.
Or 60 million. As it? Well, yeah, I think Scotland's included in that.
Sorry.
Right. Let's go back a bit. There's on the island of Ireland right now. There's roughly between north and south, maybe 6 million. There's no way 6 million can take on 60 million. So we've had it rammed down our throats by the big bully across the pond for 800 years. Now, because of Europe and because of modern day communications, they can't get away with the old days of sending armies and beating the shit out of us, and that's how we reach agreement. No, so Jude, Scotland going independent would be a massive distraction for a lot of people over here. And we're chatting earlier on about the people here about feeling perfidious Albion and all. Scotland going independent or having a vote for would be far more destabilizing for the north of Ireland, the 6 counties, the wee province, than anything else, because it would indicate the start of the breakup of the union.
That's right. I was thinking today, was there a historical precedent for it? And a fairly good one would be when the south of Ireland got its independence from Britain in 1921 or whatever. That had a great effect on India. And it's on the record that they really took heart from that, because Ireland was essentially the first member of the empire to
break away.
And it was, you can see how many other countries have done the same thing since, but they were the first, and certainly India came behind them, and they are open in their acknowledgement of the effect and encouragement that gave them. I would say the same thing on steroids with regard to Scotland. It would give enormous heart to people who wanted to have control over all of Irish affairs. Wales, amazing. Wales
is starting to waken up, isn't it?
There's something like 30% of them now want independence.
It's gone from about 10% to well over like 37 in a space of about a year.
Yeah. Well, if Scotland gets independence, I don't know. It'd be hard to say it wouldn't have an effect on Wales. It certainly will have an effect on Wales.
Jude, here's a question or a thought for you. Do you seriously see a Scottish guy up in the Highland wearing the kilt, likes his wee whiskey, maybe a crofter or a whatever, or a fisherman, or lives up, or a gamekeeper up away, having the same as a Tory down in the Shires? That they're very different people. And to suggest that one is the same as the other, and that Scotland is as homogenous with the home counties, is absolute bullshit.
But, they, no less than the royal family are keenly aware of that fact. And hence the late Duke of Edinburgh, hence Balmoral, which is their favourite place. Hence all sorts of things that are Scottish, that they say, oh, they're wonderful and we spend time on. So they know that the fact is that there's so little between them, in fact. So they've got to make out, oh, we love it really, and we just can't have enough of you people, you're just wonderful. So they're aware of that, if you like, that hole in the dike, the terrible difference there is between Scottish people. Think of a Glaswegian. Think of a Glaswegian guy. A guy who maybe worked on the Clyde shipbuilding or something, or his father worked in shipbuilding, And what has he got in common with the likes of Boris Johnson
All right,
or
Jude,
David Cameron?
I think we're Celts all under the bonnet, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because when I meet a Scottish person, I have no problem. But sometimes in my other life, when I was a newspaper editor, I used to meet these management guys coming over from London. Sometimes they had the personality of a wall, and in fact, that's a bit unfair to the wall now to think of. But there were these guys who could spend 15 minutes telling you about how a cricket ball was made, and I was going, "Good merciful Jesus, get a life!" Now, but you sit down with a Scottish guy and you have a wee dram and a bit of crack, and the banter is going right away. Yeah. And I'm saying must be a Celtic blood thing or a kinship that's there between us, that doesn't exist between us and the Anglo-Saxon. And by the way, that's not racist, it's just an observation.
Yeah, I must say, I felt it in meeting Welsh people even more. I always thought when I heard the Welsh accent, it always reminded me of Cork people. And Cork people are very lively and are all out for a bit of fun. And these Welsh people I met were a bit similar to that, Yeah. And they like song, music.
My youngest son went over to Cornwall. He was at a wedding about 4 or 5 years ago. And when they found out he was Irish, all these guys come over and sat beside him. And he says, "It's unbelievable." And they kept telling him, "We're not English, we're Celts."
Very good. Well, it's true. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. I think people like to have what they see themselves as being acknowledged. And that's denied in terms of, I believe, in terms of the UK. Okay, we've kicked the living daylights out of the UK. And we've kicked the living daylights out of poor Edmund Pouts. Paul Given, who else was there? Excuse
me, Dr. Collins, Paul Given. Let's just kick him one more time. There was a guy on the week of Christmas withdrew a grant, LEFA grant, for a wee small Irish college in Belfast. What was it, 50,000? And at the time, 650 million went down the cash for Ash. Let's not forget how generous and decent Paul was on the week of Christmas. And then actually had the nerve, as he withdrew that grant, said "Happy Christmas," which was actually, when you think about it, no, not said because it would come across as bigoted and sectarian.
Yeah, well, you couldn't wait to have a guy like that in position.
As First Minister,
I would like that too. Anything else to talk about? Are we running out?
Yes. Hey, Jude, Dr. Collins. Me and the wife were sitting last night, and he said, "See, tomorrow morning, if all the blinds were pulled again, and life returned to normal, and COVID was over, what is the very first thing where would you like to go if tomorrow morning the world opened up again and international travel is back on? Where would you go?"
That's too hard, Pat. You're asking me to the entire world back.
Doesn't matter.
I want to be more realistic. Confine it to that you're allowed to go anywhere you like on this island, right? Ireland, Ireland usually, but this island will do. I would like to. The Irish Times had a thing of walks in every county of Ireland, all 32, and I saved it. And it tells you exactly where they start and where you go and what's available, toilet facilities, etc. How difficult the walk is, how long it will take you, etc. I'd really like to go to a couple of those, preferably a good bit down south. Go for the walk. I'd take up to 3 hours, maybe even more. Go in feeling really, wherever we're staying, feeling really tired, but fulfilled with plenty of fresh air. Obviously have a good drink and even a nosh up for the evening and go and fall asleep sound as a bell. I'd like that with different people around me, other voices. I'd like that. My needs are humble, Pat. I don't know much.
You're a humble man, Jude.
I ask very little.
Right. No,
okay, what about you, Pat?
No, I had you about 5-7 years ago. I remember we were down in Connemara and me and the dear missus went for a long walk, Jude. And we were staying in this wee hotel. Half of it was closed. But anyway, I remember we come in and there was a fire on. And I ordered a pint of Guinness and Rosie says, "Come on." And we had a chowder. And I remember, Jude, if there's a God somewhere on this earth, God was with us that day because it was the nicest day. The pint of Guinness, the chowder and the fire. I think I fell asleep nearly sitting there. No, Jude, I was thinking of, there's a wee place up called Alpujarras in Spain. and it's up in the mountains. And seeing a summer's day, there's a place called Argiva, and it's a wee village in the middle. And I thought the other day I would love to be there. And, just sitting in the sun with a glass of wine and this wee Spanish village, watching the world go by. And I thought, before I die, I want to go there one more time.
Okay. Well, since you're going all international, and I'm happy enough in my own native land, I'll name the place I'd like to go to. Is a place called, I've told you about this before, Montecito in California.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that before.
It's where Prince Harry and Meghan live.
And I
don't ask to be their neighbor, but I'd feel privileged to be in the same sort of smallish town as them. That'd make me very happy.
Montecito. What's so special about Montecito?
Oh, well, it's just a place that we I suppose about 10 years ago now, we're driving down the coast, the west coast of the US, and we got to Santa Barbara, and anywhere we saw to stay at a reasonable price was awful, tacky, damp, rotten. So we went inland a bit, and we found this. I'd never heard of it before. This town called
I never heard of it even until you mentioned it.
Montecito, and I thought I told you this before. I looked at this hotel and God, it was nice. And then I went in and I checked the prices. Oh, geez, the prices. No way, couldn't do it.
Did you sell them to children?
Standing, myself and the missus standing on the pavement looking disconsolate. And a man comes along and I said, "Excuse me, sir, do you know of anywhere we could stay that wouldn't be too expensive, And he said, "Well, have you tried this place?" He said, to the hotel right behind us. And I said, "Well, yes, but it's very nice, but it's terrible dear." And he says, "Well, have you tried bargaining with them?" I said, "No, I haven't. Geez, I didn't know you're allowed to bargain." He said, the guy looked at his watch. He says, "Well, it's 5 o'clock now. They have a choice between getting nobody in some of the rooms and getting you in one
somebody
of the
into
rooms
the room
for a reduced price." So I went inside and I said to the guy, "I love your hotel, but your prices are killing me." And the guy said, "Just a moment, sir." I went off, talked to the manager, came back and says, "Half price." And we stayed in it, and it was marvelous. I was going to use a rude word to say how marvelous it was.
I could see the word you're going to use too.
It was owned originally by Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
And there was photographs of all the old stars of the 30s and 40s, and I suppose the 20s as well, black and white, all over the wall, all over the room, all over the walls and the stairs and so on.
Yeah.
And it was just terrific. And we came out in the morning and we didn't have our breakfast there. We walked up the street to an outdoor cafe and had our breakfast. Oh, delicious. And the sun was shining. It was terrific. But now, mind you, the neighborhood has gone down since then because Harry and Meghan have moved in. But I think it still would stand up.
You would live with that, yes.
Okay, so I'll nurse that one in my heart. I'm disappointed that you chose a foreign place, Pat, having said so eloquently how wonderful that place was in, where was it, Galway or somewhere?
Connemara.
Connemara. You would choose to go to perfidious Spain?
Yeah, Jude, very simple, Jude. I'm looking out the window now. It's raining. It's cold. Right. And that wee village, by the way, there's 2 other villages. There's one called Bennyhoffer and the other one's called Algofra. And they're not too far from Torrevieja. They're up in the mountains outside. And I will easily go for either of them if Argiva and the Alperas was ruled out.
Okay, Pat, I'll make an agreement with you. When you move there stay for a fortnight or something, I'll get my wife to come and we'll visit you and you'll put us up for about 3 days, right?
Exactly. You're on.
Spoil us. Okay, I'm feeling better already.
Good luck, Jude.
Okay,
Good luck, Jude. Cheers. Bye-bye.